Aero India 2025, Asia's largest air show. It has begun, bringing together over 900 exhibitors, delegations from 90 countries, and the presence of 26 defense ministers and 118 CEOs. That's right, those are some of the numbers. But what has grabbed global attention is the rare face-off between the world's two military giants, Russia and United States, both showcasing their cutting-edge fifth-generation fighter jets in India for the first time. Russia has brought in the Sukhoi Su-57, whilst the United States has unveiled the F-35 Lightning II, two of the most advanced fighters on the planet. And adding to the high stakes, you've got Prime Minister Narendra Modi currently in France discussing the purchase of 26 Rafale jets for the Indian Navy, and will soon head to the United States, where fighter aircraft deals will again be on the table. And amidst these developments, Defense Minister Rajnath Singh, he has reaffirmed India's commitment to building its own fifth-generation fighter jet. So where does India stand in the global fifth-gen fighter jet race? Should we buy, collaborate, or push ahead with an indigenous program? Well, to break this down, joining me on the News9 Plus show is, of course, Air Marshal Diptendu Chaudhary, a fighter pilot, and currently joining us from an airport himself. We're talking about, fighter planes and India's fifth-gen crisis, and Diptendu Chaudhary joins us right from an airport. Welcome to the News9 Plus show. Air Marshal, first and foremost, help the viewers understand so that we can get the snowball rolling. What is a fifth-generation fighter? Why is it important? Let's understand that. And with Russia now offering joint production of the Su-57E and the US showcasing the F-35 Lightning II, where does India stand in the global fifth-gen fighter jet race?
First and foremost, thank you for having me on your show. And I'll quickly get on with it. Fifth-gen fighter is essentially these nomenclature which is accepted world over on the generation which essentially identifies the kind of avionics, the weapon systems, the engine, the stealth characteristics of a platform. So we had first generation platforms from World War I, which has moved on to fourth generation during the Gulf War stage. And now we have fifth generation fighters which are coming in the way, which have improved the skin technology, improved engines, they incorporate stealth technology, advanced avionics, and an array of advanced and future weapon systems which can be incorporated into it. And obviously, they all have the latest state-of-the-art and advanced radar systems, and as well as self-protection suites. So now, the world over, most of the nations are moving towards fifth-generation platform because typically in air power and in fighter aircraft especially, the technology matters, and the technology enhances the weapon system and the platform's capabilities. So if you see what we went from gun combat earlier to close combat missiles to beyond visual range missiles, and now we have very long range visual missiles. So the combat envelope has effectively expanded, and if you don't have the latest fighters and combat platforms to keep pace with your adversaries, you're in trouble. And as far as India is concerned, we are in a bit of a spot. We've been wanting to get our fifth gen going, which is the AMCA, which is presently under the present state of affairs. It's at least a decade away. And it doesn't spell too well for us because in our neighborhood, China especially has unveiled its two sixth-gen platforms. In fact, the irony is and the tragedy is that by the time we get our fifth-gen platform going and operational, which will take at least a decade plus, in the neighborhood we would have already have sixth-gen platforms and most certainly fifth-gen platforms with Pakistan and sixth-gen platforms with China in Tibet across us, and that doesn't spell too well.
Pertinent points, Marshal, that you've raised over here. Of course, we will come to what happened to the DRDO, ADAHL and AMCA as well, but joining us here on the broadcast is News9 Plus's editor, Sandeep Punithan, who's going to be bringing us, on-ground updates from that aero show in Yelahanka as well. But, Air Marshal, we need to talk about the production of the Su-57E and the US showcasing the F-35, where India stands. And should India now look at collaborations, or should we focus solely on indigenous development? I mean, there needs to be a balance that has to be struck over here now, isn't it?
The first off, I must make one thing clear, that Atmanirbharta, which is our indigenous stance towards self-reliance, and especially in the defense industry, is a long-term strategy. Now, you cannot have one code that fits everybody. So the problem is when it comes to fighter platforms, there's a huge challenge when it comes to Atmanirbharta. We are a long way off from our research and development base, and our biggest challenge has been the aero engines. And so we would, while we would love to have absolute self-reliance on our own platforms, we are still limited in our capabilities, mainly because of reliance on engines and certain other avionics from external and certain core niche technologies from strategic partners. So unless and until, to my mind, we partner up with somebody in the interim, uh, going on our own way on the R&D path all alone, it's going to be an uphill task and it'll only increase the timelines. So it makes strategic sense to get into a strategic partnership
All
with
right.
whoever is offering us the best.
Sandeep Unithan, also with us on the broadcast, editor News9 Plus. Sandeep, tell the viewers, Yelahanka Air Base, a great 5 days that's lined up at least for the delegations, and then it's going to be thrown open to the general public as well. But that rare face-off, you've got, the F-35 and the Su-57. That's a rare face-off now, isn't it?
It's very rare to have the American fifth generation fighter, that is the F-35, be seen in the same frame as the Russian fifth generation fighter, that's the Su-57. And that is what we've seen in Yelahanka here today. Yelahanka Air Base has the Su-57, it has the Joint Strike Fighter, the F-35 in its company. It's very rare for these two fighters to be seen together, given the adversarial positions that both the Russian Federation and the United States have. But that tells you a lot about India's role as the meeting ground for these two countries, Russia and the United States. The fact that we are strategic partners with both India and the with both the United States and the Russian Federation tells you a lot about our deft foreign policy of the last couple of years. But coming back to the story of the fifth generation fighters, Air Marshal Chaudhary mentioned, it's a very sad story indeed, Kabir. The fact that we partnered with the Russians many years ago, more than 15 years back, we had embarked on this joint project to jointly develop the fifth generation fighter aircraft. The Su-57 that you see flying in the skies above Yelahanka today was an aircraft that India and the Russian Federation were meant to develop jointly more than 15 years ago. But in 2018, India opted out of the project. It preferred to focus on its own indigenous fifth generation fighter aircraft, the AMCA, the AMCA, Advanced Medium Combat Aircraft. And as Air Marshal Chaudhary just mentioned, the AMCA is unfortunately more than a decade away from induction. And what we are looking at now is a very big and unacceptable gap in India's capabilities when it comes to air power. You have the possibility of Pakistan getting something like 40 Chinese fifth generation fighter aircraft in the next couple of years. And you also just heard how the Chinese have built up a massive advantage in the air when it comes to fifth and even sixth generation fighter aircraft. So, Kabir, that leaves the Indian Air Force in a very, very precarious position. You have an Air Force that's already looking at a dwindling number of fighter squadrons. And on the other hand, you have the two potential adversaries, that's China and Pakistan, looking at fielding fifth and sixth generation fighter aircraft, and that could actually reduce the Air Force's edge, the Indian Air Force's edge in the air. When it comes to air power, the government has made it very clear in the last couple of years, Kabir, that unlike in 1962, this time around, it would deploy the Indian Air Force first. As you know, in 1962, we did not deploy the Indian Air Force despite having an advantage over the Chinese in the air. But today, in 2020, in the standoff that you saw in Ladakh, the Indian Air Force was the first to arrive on the spot. And this is something the government has made it very clear. But then the point is that you have to beef it up with numbers. You have to beef up your air power with capabilities. You have to bring in serious capabilities like the fifth generation fighter aircraft bring to the table, Kabir.
Right. Sandeep, pertinent points that you've raised over here. And Air Marshal, picking up from where Sandeep, left us. Why do you think India pulled out of that co-development project for the Sukhoi Su-57, which, like Sandeep mentioned, is currently in Bengaluru? India's past experience with the project with Russia, it ended without a deal. And when we're looking at the future, and this gap that Sandeep pointed out towards as well. What lessons has the Indian Air Force learnt from that, and how does it shape India's approach to 5th-gen fighter jet acquisitions now? Remember, Prime Minister is going to be in the United States. Fighter aircrafts are going to be on the table, those discussions. 26 Rafale jets in France as part of those bilaterals as well.
Sandeep made some very valuable points, and the answer to the question you are really seeking to is that why did we really drop out of that? Actually, it's of little consequence at this point in time, because there were transparency issues, and there were issues of the level of technology being shared, the pace of development, a whole lot of stuff. So we'll not get into that. What is important is we need to understand is I'll just differ with Sandeep on only one aspect, is that it is not just about Air Force versus Air Force. A weak air power vis-a-vis adversary like with China, and the possible collusivity with Pakistan. I mean, they are collusive because they do joint exercises together. But that besides the point. The point is that a weak air power will impact not only the Air Force, it will impact all our surface operations very, very seriously. So it is not just an Air Force to Air Force issue, it's a military to military issue. We must get that fact absolutely clear and spot on. And that's why the government is possibly in its larger understanding has given the kind of push and importance it has. The next issue is when it comes to the J-35, F-35, I beg your pardon, and the Su-57. Now, here are the few points I would like to bring out. One is a strategic aspect. We have never had an American fighter with us. We have had all kinds of other equipment. We have had transport aircraft now. But having a fighter brings in with it a caveat of a whole lot of capabilities and technologies, which the US tends to continue to retain controls over. And that is possibly not acceptable in the kind of threat scenarios we are looking at employing our aircraft. Second is having a Russian platform at this point juncture makes a little sense, because the kind of weapon systems alignments with the already existing kind of systems we have, the large Sukhoi fleet we have, integration will be so much better. And that also not only in the air, in terms of aerial integration of weapon systems, aircraft and systems, radars talking to each other, but also simply from the maintenance perspective. Similarly, for example, from the French aspect, we've had French platforms for a long time as well. But right from the post independence, we had Oregons, we have had Mystiers. The point which I'm trying to make is we've had long strategic partnerships with France as well. So there are two strategic partners we have. One is Russia, which is a long-time friend, and one is France. And on the other side, you have a US government, which we have seen the rapid shifts in their policies. So the nation has to take a choice with an eye on the ball, and in the long-term vision is how is this going to pan out.
Well, nation has to make that choice. You know, Sandeep, my final question before we wrap up this particular segment. Of course, you spoke about the Chinese 5th generation and even the 6th generation aircraft, some of those videos that did the round towards the latter half of last year as well. How many do you expect China to have in the coming decade when we're talking about the 5th and the 6th generation aircraft? And United States and Russia, two of our potential collaborators, what side do you think India is going to tilt? Because Rajnath has also made it a point, the defense minister making sure that India and Atmanirbharta has to be our focus. But because of the gap that you just spoke about, we need to be collaborating on one of these prominent platforms as well. What side are we going to tilt towards, and China in the next coming decade? How many 6th generation fighters are we looking at?
Well, I'll take the second part of your question first, Kabir. The fact is that the Defense Minister Rajnath Singh did mention that we are going ahead with the AMCA, that is the Indian Indigenous 5th Generation Fighter Aircraft Program. That is a decade away. It will be inducted at least by only about 2035 or 2036. That's what we believe. The first prototype will roll out in the next couple of years, 2 or 3 years, if all goes well. But unfortunately, we've seen several such delays in this program for very valid reasons. I mean, 5th generation aircraft are very complex platform to develop. That's the reason why so few countries have really managed to do it. The US and the Russian Federation, and of course China being only 3 countries that have fielded these aircraft. Now, as to the question as to which side will we go on, I fully agree with what Air Marshal Chaudhary said. There are strings attached to American fifth generation fighter aircraft. The F-35, a very impressive aircraft. It's had a bad run of late, of course, several crashes, but it's a very capable aircraft. I'm not sure if that's exactly the kind of aircraft that we would want, given our threat perception in the skies with the China-Pak collusive alliance. But it's here, it's on the ground, and it's very clear from Bengaluru. The reading is that the United States would want us to come in on the F-35 program as well. But the problem is, as Air Marshal Chaudhary mentioned, these American platforms, especially the fighter aircraft, they come with strings attached. And that is why you have, there is a very significant number of opinion makers in Delhi who believe that it's not wise to buy American fighter jets. You can buy transport aircraft from the Americans, you can buy helicopters, you can buy long-range maritime patrol aircraft, drones, all of these. But when it comes to fighter aircraft, which is literally the cutting edge of your Indian Air Force, there you have to be really, really careful about the kind of choices that you make. So in this case, in this scenario, Kabir, the best choice appears to be the Su-57, which is also here in Bengaluru and Yelahanka. We just saw it all of today. It's done multiple sorties. It's done some incredible loops. It's, enthralled the crowd. But when it comes to a serious decision, the government of India will look at all of these factors. That would you have, an independent platform which you can then use, sans any strings attached? Does it have commonality of equipment and spares and servicing and weapon systems, most importantly, with your existing fleet? That is something that the Su-57 brings to the table. And the Russians also know that. They have once again offered the Su-57 to continue the Su-30 production line. The plan all along was to continue with the Su-57. Once the Su-30 production line in Nashik ended, the plan was to replace it with a Su-57. That, of course, didn't happen for the reasons that Air Marshal Chaudhary mentioned, that there were reasons that we did not choose to go in for that, for transparency and for technology and sharing and all of that. But there is a third country in this mix, Kabir, and that is the French. Now, the French don't have a fifth generation fighter aircraft. They have a 4.5 generation, which is your Rafale, and of course, the Prime Minister is going to be there in France, tonight, and they're going to announce that deal for the naval Rafales 26 aircraft that we are buying.
Sandeep, making those pertinent points. So not just the United States and Russia, but France also on those potential list of collaborators. But needless to say, even as we're looking at the first day of the Aero Show, India stands at a critical juncture to buy, to collaborate, or to build its own fifth generation fighter jet. With global superpowers showcasing their cutting edge aircraft and India's indigenous AMCA program progressing, the decisions made now will define the future of the Indian Air Force for years to come. Thank you, gentlemen, Air Marshal Chaudhary and Sandeep, for joining us on this particular segment. But take a look at this as well, because from being conceptualized in the year 2009 to conducting its first test flight in 2016, the Light Utility Helicopter, LUH, developed by the Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, has seen one of the fastest deployments of any Indian defense system in a matter of 7 years. Watch Flying to the Future, why LUH is a game changer, only on the News9 app.